too sentimental, one who never sets you in a whirl, one who will be always sweet and gentle. I am not that kind of girl, but if you prefer a rather swift one, if you think you'd like to run around with a bright one, I am just the right one. Naughty baby, who will tease you? I can show the way and know the way to please.
Yes, it's Naughty Week. It's Naughty Week here at CT Public. There's some confusion, I think it's fair to say. Confusion sown mostly by me. It's mainly Naughty Week in the nautical sense of Naughty Week. And we're going to be doing, Where We Live is doing so many nautical shows. I think they're doing 8 this week. 8 different nautical shows. And they only have 5. No, they have 4 days they can do them. So anyway, and then we're doing 2. Tomorrow we are going to re-air, I think, a pretty interesting show we did. Before I say all this stuff, it's Ask or Tell Me Anything. So you can call 888-720-WNPR. Get in the queue, so to speak. 888-720-9677. You can call about anything you want. And, well, you can. You just can. There's no and about it. You can pick your own topic. But we like it. We like sort of esoteric things. I mean, look, we'll talk about whatever you want to talk about. Whatever's burning a hole in your heart right now. 888-720-WNPR. That's 888-720-9677. I'm going to be honest and tell you that either the phones aren't working or we don't have any calls yet. So, this is a good time. Chances are you get on pretty quick. Okay, so let me go back to Naughty Week. So Naughty Week, and this was the brainchild of our friends at Where We Live. And they said, does anybody else want to do Naughty Week? And, of course, everybody wanted to do Naughty Week. So there's going to be something on Disrupted. There's going to be something on Audacious. Audacious has people who are underwater for record amounts of time. I think it's like a person who held his breath underwater for a record amount of time, but also a person who stayed underwater for days and days and days, weeks and weeks and weeks, months and months, that kind of thing. What else is there? There's seasoned. I would guess clams. Shrimp, I don't know. Things like that. Anyway, what we're doing, did I say all the shows? Where We Live, Seasoned, Disrupted, Audacious. Okay, so, and then there's us. So we have a show that we did in 2019. It was all about shipwrecks. We did it down at the Connecticut River Museum and it just turns out, I mean, it's amazing how many things are either still missing or impossible to get to. And in the case of Connecticut, there was this burning of Essex. There was an attack on the shoreline during the American Revolution. And I don't know. It's fascinating. And then Captain Kidd. And so there's this double meaning of Naughty Week, right? So there's nautical, but then there's also naughty. And Captain Kidd was very naughty. Just no getting around that either. Very naughty. And it's possible that some of his treasure is hidden somewhere around here. I don't know. That's all I remember from it. It's all a dark dream leading to sleep. But so that's going to re-air tomorrow. And then we have a brand new show about sea shanties. I really like sea shanties, and I liked them before they were trendy. They got very – I know it's a little hard to wrap your mind around. But in 2021, as we sat in the thick of the pandemic, somehow or other, sea shanties on TikTok turned out to be this big thing. And there's a feature on the TikToks where you can it's called the duet feature. And you can sort of add your harmony to somebody else's, like that, and so they would build up these very harmonic sea shanties from, people all over the world, presumably, as far as the TikTok can see. So people who didn't know each other would sort of get involved with each other's songs. Well, anyway, I've always liked sea shanties anyway. And I explain, I think, on the show how much that extends, how far back in my life that extends to my very, very geeky days. Which I say that as if I've outlived them, but which is not quite true. But when I was in third grade, I was an even bigger nerdy weirdo that I am now. And so I liked sea shanties. The Beatles were coming to America, and I liked sea shanties. That's really all you need to know. That's sort of why I didn't have more friends. So anyway, we're going to do a whole show. We did it with, we recorded a lot of it last week. We brought the Jovial Crew, a group of sea shanty singers, into the studio, and they sang live. And we talked about sea shanties. And it's just going to be just fascinating as anything. And then on Thursday, we're talking about Myers-Briggs, which has no connection to the ocean that I can see anyway, but the Myers-Briggs personality types. All right, so it's Ask or Tell Me Anything. We have open lines here. We have the numbers 888-720-WNPR, 888-720-9677. Challenge me. Give me something to talk about. Give me something that I can't figure out how to talk about. I also have, and we're going to go to our first call in just a second here, but I also have, before we go to Jocelyn, I have Mr. Carp envelopes here. I mean, if nobody calls up, well, Jocelyn is called up, so that possibility no longer obtains. If nobody else besides Jocelyn calls up, I could open up Mr. Carp envelopes and I could read their contents. And they always have interesting contents which I believe are potentially instructive to humankind, or not. So that's another option. I'm just saying we have lots of options here. All right, time to go to the phones, 888-720-WNPR, 888-720-9677. Here's Jocelyn in East Haddam. Hi, Jocelyn.
Hi, how are you?
Just fine. No worse than can be expected. How are you?
I am excited about our quilt show that is going to happen at Connecticut College this weekend, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, and it's the first time we've been able to do it in 5 years with our Clamshell Quilt Guild.
Now, what is it? Is that a type of quilt, a clamshell quilt, or is that just the name of your group?
The guild.
Name of your group. So that's kind of not a weak theme, then, isn't it? That you're called the Clamshell Guild. And do you do any naughty quilts that are actually naughty?
Well, actually, we had our guild put together a nautical one that was all covered with lobsters and lighthouses.
What happened to that one? Do we have that one? Is it for sale? Can we look at it? Can we see it at the show?
Well, you can't see that one except online. That one was for the raffle that we already did. But this one, I think, is called Waves. It's a water, and it is a nautical theme on that one. There will probably be nautical quilts hanging up at the show because that seems to be something that people like to do. Are
quilters very competitive with one another? Is it a collegial atmosphere or is it cutthroat? I mean, is it just like my quilt's better than your quilt? I'll see you in hell.
No. People get very excited about other people's work and other people's ideas. So it goes from very, very traditional to modern to art quilts. So.
Are there any quilts that are the other kind of naughty, like NAUGHTY naughty?
Sometimes.
Could be. By the sea, could be.
It could be. I don't think there are any limits for what people can choose. And
I wonder about that, though.
You'd be very surprised at what people put on quilts.
Well, first of all, and that's before they even start using them. All right. Well, it all sounds fascinating, Jocelyn. I thank you so much. I could talk to you all day about quilts, especially since I have no other calls right now. So the number is 888-720-WNPR. Like, I know Iman will call at some point. So, I'm guaranteed 2 calls. 888-720-9677. So what else do I want to tell you about? Well, the other thing I'll just tell you about sort of internally. So our senior producer, Lily Tyson, is, she really is sort of the person who keeps things humming and organizes us and makes sure that we, there's a plan. Because it would upset her if there was no plan. I'm kind of fine. In fact, getting to Myers-Briggs, actually, let's just talk about Myers-Briggs for a second, because we are going to be talking about this on Thursday. And I know it's somewhat discredited now. There are people who really regard this as, a couple of rungs up the ladder from astrology, but not too many rungs. And then there are some people who really regard it as very useful. And I found it very useful in my life. And one of the ways that I found it useful is with people who aren't like me. Because I think one of the tendencies that we have, let me see if I can articulate this. I think one of the tendencies we have is to assume that everyone is like us. And then to the degree they turn out not to be, then we sort of see that as a failing. That's sort of, okay, to the degree that that person is different from me, that person sucks. I'm using some highly technical psychoanalytic language here, but I think you follow what I'm saying. And so, for example, in the world of Myers-Briggs, I think I probably score high is not the right word because it sounds like, that's a better score. And I don't think there's anything like that. It's more, I score extreme in several categories, but one of them is what's called judging versus perceiving. And people, as I understand it anyway, the people who are perceiving, people like me, kind of don't need to have everything resolved at every given moment. And I'm comfortable, for example, I'm very comfortable right now, even though I'm doing an Ask or Tell Me Anything show, and I don't have any phone calls except the one about quilting, which was excellent. I had a good time talking about quilting. But it doesn't really bother me very much, that I don't really have a plan for this show. I just have a series of kind of escape hatches that I can maybe think up. And that's very consistent with the perceiving personality. You jump out of the airplane and then you wonder if you have any parachute at all. Whereas the judging personality, and that would be definitely Lily Tyson and probably a lot of other people that I work with. For the original producer of this show is Patrick Scahill. He's also a judging personality. And the thing about judging personalities, it doesn't mean that they're judgy, as I understand it, but it's that they really do require some resolutions. They want to know how things resolve. They want to know how things are set up. They want order. They're order Muppets. They're Kermits. And I've discovered over the years that I have driven several producers out of their minds because I say, well, we'll just go on the air and it'll be fine. I don't know. We'll figure something out. In mid-show, we'll figure something out. Which is very upsetting to someone who really needs to plan a lot. But see, I didn't understand that. I think one of the things that we do, and it's just kind of human nature, is we think, okay, so that person is not like me. That person's different from me. That person needs to change. And I'm sure that the people who want to have 3 parachutes all rechecked and checked and rechecked before they jump out of the plane are very frustrated with someone like me and wish that I would change, which is perfectly understandable. But we're not going to change. I'll give you another example. I don't think this is any surprise or would violate any confidentiality, but when Kyone Wolf, now the host of Audacious with Kyone Wolf, when she worked on the show, until we had sort of a Myers-Briggs kind of speed reading consultation with Paul Teager, who's going to be on our show on Thursday, I didn't understand that I score probably kind of extreme numbers on an axis that contrasts thinking with feeling. I'm actually what they call an INTP, introvert, intuitive, thinking, perceiving. And that Wolfie scores very, well, I don't know, high, but Wolfie is solidly in the camp of feelings. In other words, feelings drive a lot of her decisions. Feelings activate her in a way that thinking tends to activate me. Well, I didn't understand that. And when you work with somebody, if you're a thinking person in a more or less supervisory capacity with a feeling person, one of the things you have to do is take their emotions into account, which is exactly one of the things I'm wired up not to do. So after a year or so of probably, either hurting her feelings or making her feel as though she was just completely starved for any kind of emotional reinforcement, I understood this difference about us. And I, wouldn't say I corrected everything, but, things got better. So I don't know. We're doing a whole show about it on Thursday. You are perfectly free to think that it's hocus pocus, which is, it's Myers-Briggs, but it's hocus pocus. that's also a legitimate. We're going to deal with that. We'll put it that way. We are going to deal with that the set of criticisms that now exist about it. All right, and we're very excited because also it's produced by our intern Carol Chen, who I think is about to become, I'm probably head of NPR, whatever that job is called. Is there a job called head of NPR? Sith Lord of NPR. I don't know what the job is called, but she's going to have it. I mean, she has greatness oozing out of her. All right, so I mean, not like a weeping sore or something, just greatness oozing out of her. All right, never mind. Oh, I should point out the Wheelhouse. I left out the Wheelhouse. How could I leave out the Wheelhouse, the most nautically named show? The Wheelhouse should be understood to be doing a nautically themed show every single time they do anything. But anyway, they are doing something about preserving horseshoe crabs. I think there are 3 horseshoe crabs that currently hold seats in the General Assembly. All right, so we have people calling in. We're going to start with Jack from Boston. All kinds of interesting calls are suddenly piling up here. Here's Jack from Boston. What's on your mind, sir?
Hey, Colin. Simple question. Do you people have any plans to do a show on ticks? You remember the CDC just came out with a stat, 30% increase just this year. And I wanted to write you a long email in March asking, please do a show. Are you possibly planning to?
Well, not until this very second, but I mean, we could. The problem is going to be, I realize, first of all, that the tick season now is basically 12 months a year almost. Right. So it's like we could do the show at any time and it would be okay. But probably we should do it September, October, or something like that. We won't get it done by August. You know, no. The rule that we have, and maybe this is a useful thing to say on the air. I don't think I've said it very often, but we have sort of this idea that we can do a show about anything, any topic, but we have to do it our way. We do it a certain way. So, like if we do a show about ticks, we'll do, a pretty eccentric show about ticks, which is not to say that we won't talk about Lyme disease and the other stuff that they carry and about the fact that there's more of them and that there seems to be higher numbers with the disease stuff and the whole cycle.
And that they have a long tail like COVID that can set you back for months or more if you're unlucky.
Right. But we would also do, we would try to learn a lot about ticks. We would try to learn the secret lives of ticks and talk a lot about that too. Because I feel like to a certain degree, most of the people know the health stuff. We'd be happy to put that in for a few minutes, but we're going to want to go deep. That tends to be what we do. We wouldn't do a show about Lyme disease. Well, we would, but this show, the way that you describe it, is a show about ticks, and we would really do a show about ticks. I don't know. I'm very open to that idea. All right. This could be a voice from my past. Let's see. We have Nadine calling in from Canton. Hi, Nadine.
Hi. How are you?
Just fine.
You were begging for callers, so I decided to call and say hi.
Was there like a desperate quaver in my voice when I was talking about that?
No, it doesn't take much for me to call you.
Yeah. Was there anything in particular on your mind today?
I don't know how I can follow up from that cheerful caller you just had.
About ticks?
Don't know.
As the old song from the 60s said, those ticks just keep getting harder to find. And that's actually true. I think they will bite you in places where, you can't even reach. I think... I believe they may have evolved to do that. Well, Nadine, it is wonderful to hear your dulcet voice. Nadine used to call my show on WTIC, and it is good to hear her today. I don't want to put any pressure on her because also we have a lot of people. I must have sounded really desperate, which I really wasn't. I would just happily sit here and open Mr. Carp envelopes and not bother anybody. But here's Richard calling from Bristol, Rhode Island. Hi, Richard.
Hi. How are you, Colin?
Just fine, just fine.
I wanted to drag you back to your nautical theme.
Yes, please do.
I'm cycling, which I know you also have an interest in. There's something called the East Bay Bike Path that runs from Providence down to Bristol, Rhode Island, and a good part of it is along the East Bay. And it's just nice out here, and when you announced your nautical theme, I thought I had to chime in.
So, it's a path along the bay. You can see the sea as you look to one side. You realize, of course, that you probably have, just because you stopped to make this call, four or five ticks have attached themselves to you in the amount of time you've been waiting.
Well, I'll tell you one thing. I turned off my Garmin. I don't want this to count against my progress today.
Oh, yeah. No, absolutely. That's fair. That's fair. All right. Well, happy cycling. Nice to hear your voice. Thank you for dragging us back to the nautically themed week that we have here. It is not a week. All joking aside, all japery aside, it is not a week here at Connecticut Public, and all the shows will have either nautically themed shows or naughty shows. We'll probably do more naughty shows than most shows will. Here's David from Cromwell. Hi, David.
Hey, Colin. I've been dying to express an interest in ski lifts and mass transit. And thinking what I've heard on Planet Green Channel about thinking within the limitless confines of the open universe. And I wanted your format to hear this over your airwaves about instead of digging all these holes and making all these empty trains run all over the place, using some form of ski lift or gondola to make stations and transport people, few amount of people, 4 at a time, 2 at a time, 6 at a time, on a quasi ski lift mass transit scenario that would work within a person's schedule rather than all these empty buses and trains running around on their schedule. Well,
first of all, this is a very interesting idea. I definitely want you to come back for the episode we're doing about psychedelics in August. But ski lifts.
Thank you very much. It was on a psychedelic trip that I thought about this.
I'm just so not floored by that revelation. I am so not surprised. So ski lifts, they tend to, so you're saying something like a ski lift. It would be halfway between
a gondola form or something that could hold a climate-controlled environment where there wouldn't have to be so much degradation of digging holes or making roadways or huge bus stations. And, to add to that, heck, we could use a cover to keep them from the elements in the form of, solar panels to help produce the electricity to make them run.
First of all, I love the solar panel idea. And I love the solar panel idea. I feel like almost anything new. If I were president or possibly king of the universe, I would say almost anything new. Anything you do, anything you build, anything you substantially remodel should have a solar energy component to it. That should be a requirement. You can't do something new that doesn't at least have derive some percentage of its power from either the sun or the wind. I think that just should be, it's like a common sense law at this point. I don't know why it doesn't, well, I do know why it doesn't exist. But back to this thing, I'm still trying to wrap my tiny little inflexible, brittle mind around it. So it would be like a monorail kind of, but with smaller cars, right? In other words, a ski lift can only go where the track of the ski lift is. So you're not really talking about a ski lift, but you're talking about something that runs above the roadbed, up in the air, and it goes along some kind of fixed rail. So it's like a monorail, but
or less complicated. I'm like, this is why I'm talking out loud on your format show, wondering if it's catching the earshot of somebody that's staring at the radio saying, I could picture a gondola form coming into a station similar to a train station, but where you could add and interject cars to it, gondolas to it, where there's a heavier requirement for traffic, and set all of them in motion and then retract them when not necessary. But a gondola would be a lot of infrastructure. I don't know, ski cable lines, something. That's kind of what I see. I see it when I drive down the highways and see these poles in the air that are following the interstates, or, in that kind of a scenario where you wouldn't have to get to a train station for a schedule. You could just walk up to the platform and say, me and 3 of my friends want to get somewhere where this thing is going at whatever time of the day.
I can't tell whether you're a genius or still just really high. It's really hard to tell. I mean, it's one or the other. I think you may be an important visionary, although I think we need another term besides gondola, because there's a whole kind of canal tie-in here, which I don't.
Oh, I'm sorry. When I say gondola, I think of the kind that go up.
Yes.
The likes of the mountains. It's an enclosed car rather than everyone with this horrible vision of 15 degrees out, 5 o'clock in the morning in December, with their briefcase and coffee in hand on this open chair.
All right. Well, look, Dave, we absolutely need a break here. But I am sending your idea to the highest authorities, and I'm sure they'll get back to you because they already know who you are and where you live. Let's take a break. We'll be back with more Ask Her Tell Me Anything.
Ashore. He's got money galore, and he's seldom cut short of a job. He can dress now as well as any can tell, with a good silver watch in his fob. Poor Jack in his life was never paired with a wife, so sometimes with glasses he links. He's a seafaring, sail-making, gambling, capering, grog-drinking hero, Jack Hinks.
See, one nice thing about Not a Week is it's a great excuse to play Great Big Sea. And speaking of what we play here, by the way, the number here is, let me just tell you something. You know at the beginning of the show where I had like one call and it was about quilts and I was just saying I didn't have any calls? It turns out we had like a lot of calls, but they just weren't showing up technologically somehow, which happens more often than you might think. All right, so... why don't we do this? Let's. All right, we have many ways we could go here, but since we just were talking about music, I'm going to try to find this call. There he is. We have a lot of people named David calling up today. It's kind of David Day, and we haven't even had from Dave from Lake Como calling yet. Here's David from Bethlehem.
Hi, Colin.
Hello.
So, yeah, hi. Can you hear me?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Hi, excellent. Yeah, I'm calling because I love the music on your show. I like a lot of it, including the sea shanties. But I've been wondering, when I do listen, I never hear any classical music. And it seems to me that there's a gap there, and I wonder if that's, just the way it is, or if it's something that you have thoughts about.
I do have thoughts about it. You will be pleased to hear that on an upcoming, we have a show about short stories. It's coming, I think in a couple of weeks. And out of one of the segments, we're using Other Song by Caroline Shaw and So Percussion. Now, this isn't that's not classical music. I think we're talking about I hope we're talking about classical music in a pretty expansive way that, would extend from the classical period all the way through modern composers like Max Richter or Arvo Pärt. I love Caroline Shaw. There was a particular reason why I picked that for this particular thing. The biggest problem with classical music is we do rely a lot on music with words. We don't play a lot of jazz instrumentals either. We don't... we might use those for music beds, but we do rely on words just because, so often we're trying to key what we're playing to what it is we're talking about.
Right. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. But I agree. I'd like to be very inclusive, and I'd like to include more stuff. And I'm trying to get a little hipper, too, about sort of some of the more recent music. I mean, I am paying a lot of attention to Caroline Shaw right now, but to music kind of like that. I mean, there's no reason why we can't find some really cool, Philip Glass or Brian Eno kind of composition, or a Terry Riley or something like that. And we should be working more of that. I think if you do Mozart, it's a little jarring. It just...
Well, that's so sad to hear that. I'm a total Mozart freak.
I know.
Wonderful things you could bring in. But, yeah. but I understand. You have a leaning toward the present or something that comes within 50 years. Of
the rule that I lay down for everybody, and thank you so much for your call. But the rule I lay down for everybody on the show is we pull music from basically 1923 to 2023. We've got kind of a 100-year period, and so we're certainly as interested in anything Jerome Kern wrote in 1923 as we are as anything that Kendrick Lamar wrote in 2023. But when we go a little bit back further than that, it starts to feel kind of period and a little out of things. All right, so we've got a lot of things that we have to deal with here. Some of them are connected to other things that we've talked about, and some are not. I don't even know what that means. But just out of the blue, let's talk to Rathan in New Haven. You have the floor. What's on your mind? I know what's on your mind, but they don't know what's on your mind.
I heard you say New Haven, but didn't hear you say my name.
Oh, no, I did say your name.
Me.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, gotcha. I wanted to get your thoughts on ice cream, specifically soft serve ice cream versus regular hard serve. I'm not even sure what you call it. I love ice cream in all forms, but I have pretty strong preferences and was wondering how you felt.
Well, I share a life with a woman who doesn't even really need a phone to locate Dairy Queens when it comes to, speaking of soft ice cream now. Like she just doesn't even, I think it's like cybernetically, there's some kind of motherboard inside her head where she would just know, what the nearest Dairy Queen would be, even if we're in an area she's never visited before. So there's sort of that. And, I feel like soft ice cream is experiencing the opposite of a renaissance. I think there's a kind of period of decline in soft ice cream. You don't get offered, and it's certainly frozen yogurt. When's the last time you went by a frozen yogurt stand or place?
Oh, yeah. It's been like a decade.
That's so over, which is weird because there was a period of time where people just loved it. So I feel as though temporarily hard ice cream, I like calling it that, hard ice cream, because it makes them sound like an iron fist. And I think right now that's true. Hard ice cream has its boot on our neck right now. I don't think we have the choices we used to have. And I'm not comfortable with that. How's that for having an opinion? That's a hot take on ice cream.
That's pretty good. I don't know. There's a new soft serve ice cream place that just opened in my neighborhood not that long ago. So I think it might be having a comeback.
Well, New Haven is the cutting edge of these things. We won't get it in the rest of Connecticut for 2 or 3 years. But so go to New Haven. Well, thanks. That was a very interesting question. I wonder why did people turn against frozen yogurt? They liked it so much. I mean, they liked it too much. And no, they don't like it at all. I don't understand. All right, let's go back to David's gondola mass transit idea. I should have thought of this, but fortunately somebody else named David. I mean, I really can't tell you how many people named David have called up today because I don't know, but also because there were a lot. So David from East Hartford, you now have the David chair of mass transit.
Thanks, Colin. You were having some fun with the gondola guy, but don't they have the Roosevelt Island Tramway in New York? I mean, it's a real thing, isn't it?
Yes. Now, what I would say is if I understood the thinking of David 1, as opposed to you, David 2, David 1's idea was, I mean, so the Roosevelt Island thing, it goes from one place to another place, and that's it. Right? I mean, you can't take the Roosevelt Island Tramway to Soho or to Harlem. You can just take it to Roosevelt Island and back. It doesn't really have any stops in the middle, as if I recall. You get on it, you go over, you get off.
So that's with Stallone. It's fighting terrorists.
Yeah,
no, it doesn't.
That's right.
Stop.
So David 1's idea is that you take that and you turn it into mass transit, so that. Maybe New York City is not a great place to try this.
Well,
but
I think you could use it to get pedestrians across a bridge because you don't have to build infrastructure. You kind of hang the gondola off the existing bridge and put, for pedestrians.
Right. If we're going to pitch this idea at public hearings, let's not mention Sylvester Stallone, all right? Because I just don't think it really adds to our case. No, I think, for example, a place like Hartford, and to a less, so Hartford has real problems, right? In the sense that, we have this incredibly bizarre viaduct / interchange that was probably designed by a woman who ran a department store in Hartford. And it's really hard to incorporate mass transit or even non-mass transit. But to your point, yeah, if you wanted to create something that would, at least offer the mass transit aspect that it would be unencumbered by other kinds of traffic. Yeah, just something that you could get on, let's say, where the Yard Goat Stadium is, right now, and then go south a number of stops and maybe go west a little bit towards West Hartford and then east to go see you, go across the river to see you in East Hartford and Manchester. I could see a gondola type system. And I think David One's idea is that you wouldn't necessarily, first of all, it might be easier to build, who knows, but you certainly wouldn't have to rip up roadbed or figure out, what you're going to do with the existing ground transportation in order to make room for it. And then what he likes about it, or what he liked about it when the ayahuasca was kicking in initially, was that you could just do smaller cars. You do, if 8 people want to go somewhere, then 8 people go somewhere. There's an 8-seat car that takes off.
I think it's too slow for that. If you're hanging off a wire, you've got to move slow.
Maybe it could be just a zip line, and you could just grab something and go wherever it is you want to go. Obviously, we've got to iron some of the kinks out of this thing, but we're going to get there. All right, so let me do Dawn and then Iman, and then we'll probably take another break, and then we'll go back to your other calls. But here's Dawn, who's been waiting a while. Hi, Dawn.
Hi, Colin. How are you?
Just fine.
I am delighted to finally speak to you. I've tried to call in many, many times and not made it through.
Oh, no.
You spoke, and you're going to play the program on Wednesday with the Jovial Crew, Monday night at the Griswold Inn.
Yep.
I am what they call the band empress. I sit at the band table and talk to people, sell them CDs, and give them information if they're interested in booking and that kind of stuff. But I'm also Rick Spencer of the Jovial Crew's primary music partner. And we will be singing, we did last week, and we will be again on Friday this week at Mystic Seaport. They're doing an event, a new event called Sunset at Spouters. So you have the option of sitting at Spouters Tavern from 5 to 7. You don't have to pay Seaport admission. You could come in and hear sea shanties for 2 hours, sing to your heart's content, have a water or an adult beverage if you like, and it's a great setting.
I came up with this idea, which I mentioned to the Jovial Crew, and they didn't reject it out of hand, but nor did they embrace it. So since I now have somebody else from the sea shanty community here, I think there needs to be an update on certain sea shanties, and I'll give you an example. What shall we do with a drunken sailor? What shall we do with a drunken sailor? What shall we do with a drunken sailor? Early in the morning. Get him in a 12-step program, matey. Get him in a 12-step program, matey. Get him in a 12-step program, matey. Early in the morning. Set our sails for Betty Ford. Now set our sails for Betty Ford. Anyway, you see the idea that I've got here. It's just some of these songs are a little bit out of date. I don't think they reflect...
I have added a verse to that song of "Make 'em listen to the Partridge Family."
Well, make the punishment fit the crime. That's what I say. All right, I really need to go to a break, but also, Iman is a thinker of such imports that I don't think she can be kept waiting. What do you think? What should I do? We need a break. It says we need a break. All right. Well, oh no, that was the old we need a break. That was the break we needed 20 minutes ago. All right, I'm going to go to Iman in New Haven. Hi, you have the floor. I know you've been thinking a lot about sports lately.
That is true. I also really enjoyed your singing just now. That was excellent.
Thank you.
I was thinking, so I've been thinking about the AI in the arts and, the writer's strike, the actor's strike, and I started thinking, well, what if AI came for sports? And in some ways it has already. I think statisticians use AI to kind of figure out what the best plays are when and when players should be rested and everything like that. But what if instead of having actual athletes, we had robots that could dunk every single time or just be perfect? Would we be more interested in watching that than watching real people do sports?
No, I assume we'd be less interested because sports the fundamental bargain, the philosophical bargain of sports is what can the human body achieve? What can this human body and skill set and brain? It all comes together. And, either you're Pete Maravich or you're just some guy dribbling a basketball, to me, that's, I think for most people, some of the excitement is, you watch the Olympics, you think, oh, Usain Bolt is like really fast for a human being, having him run against robots or robots run against each other. But to your earlier point, I think probably AI will get the kind of sort of the metric analysis. I'm looking for there's the quantitative analysis part of sports. As you say, it's already a big part of it. But I mean, you could take something like boxing, the sport that you love. I don't know if they've done that yet, but you could have AI ingest videos or films of every single fight a boxer had that made it onto film, and come up with a plan for beating that boxer. You got to hit him this way, and then that way, and that'll be interesting. I think you still need human beings out there throwing the punches and ducking, but you know what I'm saying, though.
I agree with you, and I think that's true to some extent. This might get me on a little bit of a thing about women's sports. I agree. I think so much of sports is about what can you do, what can you achieve in this very body that you have. And yet, when I hear a lot of people men mostly talk about why they're not interested in watching women's sports, it's often this comparison of well, they can't do it quite like the guys. And it's actually competition is relational between the two people on the field. And so I kind of do think that there's a group of people who watch sports who actually just want to see the most exceptional thing and don't really care so much about, they want to see certain types of people do things. They don't want to just see people do sports. Yeah, I mean, I think, first of all, several things can be true at once. And I think here in Connecticut, first of all, we've come to understand that women's basketball, although it might involve, less dunking and just not the rip-roaring pace that the fastest guard can take darting down the court in the NBA, that there's a kind of beauty and elegance and watchability to the game that in many ways has begun to escape the men's game. And I think the biggest mistake you can make is try to make a women's game more like the men's game. You need to look at it for what it is, what it does, what it will tend to do better than the men's game. I think women's boxing, which, believe it or not, I've watched in person a decent amount of, is kind of the same way. Yeah. I mean, first, I think it's less knockout oriented. I don't think there are many, at least I've never seen, I might have seen one that ended in a TKO. I don't know. But just because of the upper body strength and stuff like that, I assume. But that means there's more skill there. You have to win on points, which means you don't even have the option, probably very often, correct me if I'm wrong, of going for the knockout most of the time. You've got to figure out how to outfight the other fighter. I agree. And that's why I love women's boxing. I mean, as a women's boxer, I like that. I wasn't fighting huge people who could knock me out because I didn't want to get knocked out, Yeah. Yeah. All right. Okay. Well, we have to stop here because I should have taken the break. But we're going to take the break now. We'll come back. We'll squeeze one or two calls onto the air. The number is 888-720-WNPR. Let's play this all the way to the end, Kat. We are back. Kat Pastor is the technical producer today, and Jonathan McPants is in there screening calls and producing this episode. Once again, I don't know. We don't have them. We're just going to take these two calls, and then we'll be done. All right, let's go to Anthony in New Haven, and then we'll have Rich from Middletown, and that'll probably be the whole show. Hi, Anthony. You have the floor.
Hey, Colin. Thanks so much. I appreciate it. Great show. I'm a longtime listener. So I was recently in New Orleans a few weeks ago visiting my dad. Mm-hmm. And, one of the big stories of all over the country was this heat wave. And it was legitimately, seriously, 100. The heat index was 110 a lot of days. And, I saw that on the news. My dad watches a lot of news. And it seemed to be the main story, and how, they're talking about how dangerous the heat is. And, to me, it was kind of funny because they would interview people on the street to talk about how dangerous it would be out on the street.
Yes.
I kind of wonder, well, why don't you just go inside? But, when I actually went out, there was this huge disconnect in my mind.
Mm-hmm.
Because I went to City Park, which is the main park. Kids are playing on the playground. Moms are pushing strollers. I saw a kid in a hoodie fishing. I see people in, not a lot of people, but some people in long sleeves. I went to the French market, and there's this covered outdoor area. And, it had to have been 115 in there. And nobody is missing a beat. Nobody is changing what they're doing. And so there's this huge disconnect between how it's being portrayed on TV as this dangerous thing that people cannot handle versus the reality, which is people, the human body is pretty adaptable. You can tolerate 110, probably even 115. And the last thing I'll say is, I was staying with my dad, and he's an elderly guy, and like a lot of elderly people, he doesn't like air conditioning. But the heat index is 110 outside, and we're in an apartment without air conditioning.
Yeah.
So I'm just curious on your thoughts of this. And one last thing, before I hand it back to you, I wonder if it has anything to do with a sort of desire to persuade the holdouts on global warming or climate change, if that's part of this, sort of over, coverage, I would say, of the heat wave.
I don't know. I think the heat wave is a real thing. First of all, yes, in the South, people know how to deal with heat better than they do up in the North. They just know how to live alongside it, maybe how to pace their days a little bit, maybe how to find the breezy spot in the park or the shady part of the front porch or whatever. But, what we've been through this summer is absolutely the engine light blinking on the dashboard. We are setting records all the time now, and they're not the good kind of records. And you've got the over 100 degree ocean water in Florida. I realize it's not the first time that's ever happened, but it's all of this has to be interpreted as a warning. And not to make everything political, and actually we've gotten through the whole show without being political, but I kind of don't understand, like Biden right now has an industrial policy, an economic policy. Bidenomics is based on very, very heavily on the idea of clean energy. I don't know how you run against that. The Republicans really seem to still want to kind of deny the reality of global warming and climate change, the urgency of dealing with it. If they get in, typically what they do is they weaken the EPA. They weaken all kinds of laws that mandate conservation and mandate clean energy policies. I don't know how that's even politically viable anymore. I don't know why anybody would vote, and particularly anybody young. I'm, probably around your father's age or so. We're going to live on this planet for, if we're lucky, another 20, 25 years, something like that. But people who have to live their whole lives have their whole lives ahead of them, and this planet is becoming less and less habitable. I don't know how anybody successfully campaigns anywhere, particularly if the youth vote. I was thinking a lot today about these two subjects. I have to apologize to Rich. We just didn't get to you, but thanks for your call. And I'm sure we'll be talking about gondolas in the future anyway, because people talk about gondolas all the time. But I've been thinking a lot about the youth vote in 2024. If a lot of young people vote, it's going to be very bad news for the Republican Party. All right, we have to go. Thanks for listening. Thanks for everything. We'll see you tomorrow.